What's going on, everybody? Johnny Bandon, the networking guru here, and in today's video, we're going to continue on with our CYSA self-paced video series. In today's video, we're going to continue on domain 1.3, going over common techniques for appropriate tools or techniques to determine malicious activity. So let's get my face out of here. Let's dive into the PowerPoints and let's get certified on CYSA. Okay, so we're going to be going over domain 1.3.2. Given a scenario, use appropriate tools or techniques to determine malicious activity. And we're going to go over other techniques or common techniques that can help us determine malicious activity. And some of these tools actually stop malicious activity. When we get into like email analysis and SPF and DKIM, I'll touch on how that's kind of more of like a preventative technique. So common techniques, again, this is saying email analysis. You're going to notice in here, some of this stuff will actually prevent though. So yes, it does. There are tools and techniques to determine malicious activity, but some of these tools also actually just help protect, are a part of your defense in depth approach to protecting your enterprise. So keep that in mind, okay? But we're going to be going over all these sub objectives or these objectives here. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is pattern recognition. So pattern recognition refers to the analytical process of identifying regularities, repetitions, or anomalies in data that may signal an attack. So at just a high level, what we're saying here is that our enterprise is going to have a baseline of how data is moved, how data is used. So what we mean by that is, imagine you're just in a 100-person office. Maybe you have 2 stories. You have the typical departments of a medium-sized company. You got HR, you have accounting, you have sales, you have marketing, you have mid-level management, whatever the case may be, right? And you have a typical 9-to-5 shift. Maybe so you have some remote workers, you have some stuff in the cloud, whatever the case may be. Your network is gonna have like a baseline, right? And when something deviates from that baseline, whether it's something historical that you can reference that's in some sort of signature database given to us from OSINT or malware vendors, I say malware vendors, anti-malware vendors, or it's heuristics based where we say, hey, we're noticing a lot of login failures over here. We're noticing a lot of data exfiltration at night, right? Those are all things that can become part of a pattern that maybe deviates from the norm. So if you're noticing at 2:30 p.m. every single day that there's spikes in the bandwidth on your WAN interface facing your local ISP there, that's something we may want to investigate. Doesn't mean it necessarily malicious, but it could be. It may be something that the SOC, your cybersecurity analysts want to monitor. So here, pattern recognitions, they can be signature based, matching known IOCs, that's indicators of compromise. Again, this could be some sort of hash signature database from a anti-malware, antivirus vendor. We have heuristics based, so applying rules like more than 10 failed logins a minute. So this is kind of taking a more like holistic approach where we don't necessarily need something historical, something that's a well-known IOC already in the cybersecurity OSINT sphere, right? This could just be something like, hey, we noticed that this user who's not a remote worker keeps trying to log in from a coffee shop 50 miles away. That's heuristics based, something that just kind of deviates. And then, of course, now in this AI world, I call this the AI era now. It's like the new industrial revolution. It's like ours is AI, right? Lucky us. Is machine learning driven, where it goes like a step further in heuristic space, because heuristic space has kind of always been around in a lot of antivirus, anti-malware, a lot of these, security products. But with machine learning, when we enable a large learning model to create baseline behaviors, it can really get down to the nitty gritty of something that deviates from that may take away some administrator manual matching or rules in there, like you would need with heuristic space. So let's go over a common example. So a common C2 tactic involves periodic beaconing, where a compromised endpoint, think of like a zombie or something that's a part of a botnet and you don't even know it, it keeps reaching out to a C2 server at regular intervals. So something like you're noticing every 300 seconds an endpoint's reaching out to an IP address that maybe you don't recognize, or maybe an IP address that you're like, oh, let me check this IP out. This doesn't look like, you just did maybe a quick NS lookup. Maybe you don't know about the tools I'm about to go over. Like you did a whois check on it and you're like, whoa, I think this IP is coming from some Russian-based server that's like kind of well known and blacklisted, right? So, that's something that beaconing we would want to know. And heuristics-based machine learning can do that for us. Or if it's connecting to a well-known blacklisted domain, signature-based can help us with that. So it says this activity is missed by signature-based IDS, but stands out with a statistical time series analysis. I'm gonna say yes, that's true, unless this domain was already well known, right? It just depends a little bit, but yes, it could be missed because it could be such a small data exfiltration happening every 300 seconds, right? Just want to move on there. So command and control. So if you didn't know what C2 was, command and control. It's like command and control servers are like typically what we see in botnets, but it's also just a way that hackers create persistence on our networks, which means they always backdoor some sort of command and control server, right? That is, is talking or chatting with some sort of malware installed on our devices. So, command and control is a phase of the cyber kill chain in which the attacker establishes remote control over a compromised host. The C2 infrastructure enables data exfiltration, lateral movement, or payload delivery. So, a bunch of different ways that an attacker can do C2 that maybe is hard to detect, meaning that it kind of tunnels itself in what normal traffic looks like. So HTTP/HTTPS tunneling. So like I've talked about this a lot in my videos because I feel like it's something that engineers sometimes forget, especially from the network side, and something that is very important in the cyber, uh, as a cyber analyst, is like HTTPS, remember, is end-to-end encrypted. So if you don't have some sort of proxy, next generation firewall, or something in the middle of that packet flow from endpoint, your user, to some sort of web server, you will not be able to see inside that data payload because it's encrypted, right? And when I say you won't be able to see, if you do have a firewall or something on there, yes, you can see, of course, the layer 4 information, the ports and stuff, but you won't be able to see inside that payload that could be something like PII or maybe health records or something being exfiltrated, right? User information, because it can be tunneled, right? It can be encrypted through HTTPS. So all that to say, if you have firewalls doing next generation firewalls, you have like some sort of proxy that's killing the HTTP session and rebuilding it back up so it can do URL filtering, you need TLS inspection on that. Another way malware or attackers hide is through DNS tunneling, where DNS looks like it's a protocol we all need, we all use, but this is malicious payloads commands encoded in DNS queries that may be hard to discover as well. And then we have other examples here, custom protocols, just saying using non-standard ports, and you may notice, hey, we're using a non-standard port on a destination, right? Which may not be as normal, having the ephemeral ports on a destination port. Social media APIs, bots using Twitter or Slack as covert control planes. And then we have out-of-band C2. This is like mobile apps or removable media. So, I go put malware on a USB, I throw it in the parking lot, I put a nice label on it that makes it look legit from your company, and you plug it in because you're a curious little cat, right? Some of these detection techniques, entropy, sorry, I'm not very good in English. High entropy in HTTP headers or DNS names can indicate encryption or encoding. And then we have these other techniques here that I don't want to deep dive into because they weren't exactly on, the exam objectives, but if you want to look them up, feel free. GL3 fingerprinting. This can detect TLS client fingerprint anomalies via JA3 hashes. Essentially, during the HTTPS session, the way we come up is first we do a TCP, IP reachability. We do a TCP handshake, and then we do like a TLS client to server handshake as well. And those JA3 hashes are pretty much a database that says, hey, this TLS session is going to like some sort of destination that is untrusted, right? And we're basing that off the TLS session actually building up. We have DGA domain monitoring. This is identifying algorithmically generated domains using linguistic models or passive DNS analysis. Then we have beacon timing detection using statistical models to identify regular C2 pings. Again, that's just more or less saying, hey, we kind of know right now, this far in the game with cybersecurity, that if C2 is happening on our network, that it's going to probably be an interval. It's not going to be a consistent connection that would make it easier for us to identify, right? So we can kind of say, hey, let's see if we notice some consistency in these beacons, every 30, every 60, every 300 seconds. Okay, now going over interpreting suspicious commands. So suspicion command execution is often the most immediate evidence of a live attacker or malicious script. Tools like Sysmon, AuditD, or EDR agents can capture command history. Again, let's say Sysmon or AuditD, these are like just tools that can help us look at like the history. And then EDR agents is actually like something you will have to install, okay? Understanding which commands are likely malicious requires technical context. So we just have some quick examples here, guys, that again, we don't want to get wrapped up too much into this. We just want to know for the CYSA exam, like, hey, in Windows, we could have PowerShell abuse, and then Linux, we have like bash scripting, okay? So PowerShell abuse in Windows, we have a command here called PowerShell with the widget or the witch here. Sorry, the switch here, -enc, base64. This can obfuscate payload execution. Then we have this PowerShell command. It's new object net.web client download string. This can download and run remote code, kind of like the curl command you would see in Linux, where it just reaches out right to a malicious website to download a payload, kind of like behind the scenes, right? The user wouldn't notice because it's not going to open up a web browser for you. Then we have system enumeration. These are just commands that can help us in our reconnaissance phase. So what I want to do here is I want to bring up a Kali Linux box and show you the netstack command and show you how we can look at TCP sessions using the netstack command. Okay, so I got a Kali Linux VM pulled up, and this doesn't have to be Kali. You know, this netstack command can be in anything. Just a lot of my live virtual sessions, I just like using Kali, right? I'll go to one of the best YouTube channels out there right now just to start a TCP session. I'll come to YouTube and I'll type in the networking guru. All right, there I am. So we have that web session, you know, just a shameless plug real quick. Let me clear this. Sorry, that was playing in the background. Okay, let's look at that netstack command. So one of the ones I like is dash, one of these switches, ANTP. And this will show me my established TCP sessions. So obviously right now, I'm not going to simulate, what a malicious payload would look like. But typically what you would see here is like SH, meaning like a bash script, which is pretty much saying, hey, a bash script launched a TCP session, probably running in the background. And so let's say this was something that we deemed malicious. I can take this process ID here and just go ahead and kill that session. Now, obviously, when it comes to like digital forensics and investigation, maybe you don't just want to just kill it right away, but maybe it's just like you just want to see if it comes back. Sometimes that happens, right? With a bash script, it'll be like, let me kill this, and if it comes back, there's probably some sort of startup or daemon service that keeps running this, right? That keeps running this data exfiltration or this malicious TCP connection. Okay, let's head back to the slides. Okay, so Linux intrusion, so more suspicious commands. So we have this curl command. So again, this curl command just goes out to a website, a web server really, right? It's doing a web session and it's downloading this bash script here and then executing that script in bash. We have this command, a crypto miner running in the background. That's like, these tests, these CompTIA tests, I think they try to, stay up with the times. So they always want to talk about on your network, users could be running crypto miners in the background, and that's what spikes CPU and GPU. And here's a command, because this keeps coming up, right? Like if you've been watching this video series, they talked about that for like CPU, GPU activity a lot. Like, crypto miners, right? Another thing that we can look at is log tampering. So we can see, hey, is somebody clearing the logs in our systems? So here, this will clear your Windows event logs. So if you run this command, someone could also wipe your Linux authenticate, really any log, right, with this command as well. So maybe if we notice a script keeps running that executes this command, right, like a script that got downloaded from http://badip.com, that's wiping our Linux authentication logs. And with Linux, all your logs live in this var directory. So in the file hierarchy standard in Linux, var is always going to hold your logs, right? And as a cyber analyst, you need to know that, okay? And then detection and correlation. So correlate commands or process lineage. Who spawned the shell? Was it explorer.exe or winward.exe? So that kind of shows you like, hey, why is Notepad maybe the thing that's starting this process? That's kind of a red flag, right? Why is there a TCP session started by a bash script? That's also kind of like a red flag, okay? All right, now jumping into email analysis. So what we're about to go over here is one of the big threat vectors in an organization. I mean, there's whole cybersecurity companies kind of dedicated to coming in and doing cyber awareness for these mid-level organizations that may not have dedicated cyber people. And their whole job is to pretty much warn you of phishing attacks, warn you of these social engineering attacks and these huge threat vectors like email. And it's because it's a big attack surface, right? Your email is one of the biggest attack surfaces when your users, it's public, when you can look when you can get into your company's Outlook from your cell phone nowadays and from your personal computers and from the office all in one, giving that seamless experience to do work, but it increases the attack surface. So what we're going to talk about here is email analysis and then technologies that help us with protecting that threat vector. We're going to talk about SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Now remember, this was common techniques to detect and interpret and stuff. That's what the domain is. But it goes over technologies that really just help us protect our email gateways, okay? So first, let's just talk about basic analysis we can do. So email is a universal vector for initial compromise. A successful phishing campaign often leads to all this malicious stuff, right? Credential theft, malware delivery, account compromise. So as analysts, we must be able to visually inspect our emails. And then we also want to be able to teach it as well, right? Because beyond these tools, it's always going to be user education, right? That really helps you prevent against phishing. But of course, humans are not perfect, and eventually someone will fall to it. So we have other tools to help prevent it, the phishing campaign from even reaching you. But let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is header analysis. So an email header reveals the SMTP hops and authentication status. So when we say SMTP hops, that's a email protocol. It's gonna kill me. I'll put it in post. I can't remember what SMTP stands for exactly. I think it's like the simple message transport protocol. It's gonna bug me that I did not have this prep. That's okay though. But nonetheless, an email header reveals the SMTP hops and authentication status. So what we want to see here is the mail relay chain. So where's it coming from, right? What's the return path? And then we're going to talk about this soon, the SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. One thing I want to show you guys though is this website right here. This is a screenshot from what I inserted into it. I just got my email from ZipRecruiter. I grabbed that header and I placed it in this email analysis. Here's the website right here. And it showed me, who it was signed by and pretty much if it's legit or not. Up here is one that I grabbed from just like Google Images right here. And this gives a little bit more information from their headers, right? Okay, impersonation detection. So impersonation attacks aim to deceive recipients into trusting the sender. It's just saying, hey, like, we're going to trick you to think we're actually from Microsoft or we're actually from, this legit company. So some of these like lookalike domains or Microsoft-support.com, which hopefully that domain is not able to be registered or bought anymore. Then we have homoglyph attacks. It's just using the acrylic A instead of the Latin A. And then, it's nice right there that it didn't switch it up for you in this font. I'm going to definitely edit that in post too. Let me actually pause and show you guys what that looks like now because I just noticed that it's not showing you the correct acrylic A. So give me 1 second. Okay, just had to change the font right there, but you see how this looks a little bit different than this one here? Now this is not showing it correctly. I'm going to pause the video again and go online and show you. Okay, so this is a good little summary that I didn't put in my slides. So sorry if I feels like I'm everywhere here, but you really can't notice the difference here. But you can see it has a different Unicode point, pretty much saying like, hey, these are not the same. So in like systems, web systems, that acrylic letter A was not going to be in our Latin A. So that's another way we can kind of like spoof domains. So we come back here, you can kind of see how this is all the same font. Like I use the same font right here in this line, but you see the acrylic A comes out different, right? It still looks a little different even though I'm using the same font there. So it is still kind of showing us. Sorry, I got off on a little tangent there. Sometimes my ADD is just popping, right? I didn't take my meds today. And then we have display name spoofing. So say from finance team and then it's some random email, but from the typical user, they'll just be like, oh, from the finance team, right? So that's an impersonation. Okay, now getting into these actual technologies or tools that help us protect our email. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Sender Policy Framework, which essentially uses DNS, okay? It's built off what's called a DNS text record, and that text record is going to say, hey, trust everything coming from here, or trust that, if this is my DNS server and another email server is going to my DNS and it needs to check, hey, who are you, right? Can I trust you? I have this text record, and this is the actual text record I have on my DNS server. This is a screenshot from Squarespace, my DNS server that trepatech.com uses that says, hey, pretty much trust spf.google.com all. So any google.com, right, domain. And trepatech.com uses Google Workspaces, right? So SPF uses a DNS test record that lists IP addresses or host names allowed to send mail from your domain. And the general way this works is when an email is received, the recipient's mail server performs an SPF check by extracting the domain name from the envelope mail from address. It's not really visible to you. It's called the mail from address. Looking up the SPF record in DNS, and again, I have this SPF record in DNS, so that's being propagated through our global DNS, and then comparing the sender's server's IP. So remember, not my computer's IP when I'm sending the email server I'm using's IP, comparing that to the authorized list in the SPF record and saying, hey, did this pass or did this fail? We also have something called a soft fail or neutral or none, but what we're looking for is the pass, okay? So this is our SPF checks. So any limitations on this, right? So this is too perfect, right? Well, SPF breaks if emails are forwarded. So as the forwarding server may not be in the original SPF record, right? So just imagine from Gmail to Yahoo and then forwards from there, SPF's not going to work, right? Because we're forwarding from Yahoo, right? I don't have that SPF record. So it may not, stop something malicious from a forwarded email. And it does not validate the visible from header, only the envelope sender. So it doesn't validate what you will visually see, okay? And again, this is something you have to put in. When I first started trepatech.com, even though it was a Google Suite Gmail, I didn't have this in there. And I had problems actually. Sometimes my emails would go to spam when I would email Yahoo, for example. Actually, this is something, that messed me up a lot. I had a lot of older students and customers at first that still use Yahoo, and they weren't getting anything from trepatech.com. So when I didn't enroll them in a course, a day one, if I noticed someone had a Yahoo email or even iCloud, they're like, oh, I never got an email. I'm like, oh, you have to check your spam. And then once I learned, right, because I came from a background where I was in the Department of Defense, and those exchange servers, we never touched them, right? It was always like an email, an exchange server admin, like the only person that had rights to it, because you can mess things up. So I never learned this stuff. And then through my business, I've learned oh, wow, no, email, yeah, that's a huge threat vector. And I have to make sure that I'm prepped even as a small company. So again, SPF is not a silver bullet. It only authenticates the envelope sender, not the from header that the user sees. So that's why SPF is used in combination with something called DKIM and DMARC, which we're about to learn about. Also, guys, a lot of these images, I didn't really want to recreate, these little network diagrams are already online that look amazing. So all the links to where these images are from are going to be in the description, right? Because I want to, give the rights, right? It's like, hey, this person made this imagery, so I'm going to link in the description. Okay, then DKIM, domain keys identified mail. So this is actually going to use PKI now. So this is actually going to be a cryptographic way that we can verify emails using a private and public key, where the private key stays on my email server and the public key again is out there globally. So DKIM is a method of cryptographically verifying an email's content has not been altered from the sender to the recipient. So the basis of how this works is asymmetric encryption, where a public-private key pair is generated by the domain owner. So that'd be me, right? Imagine it's trepatech.com. The private key is used to generate a digital signature. So we're going to use a private key to create a digital signature, and then we're going to hash that encrypted stuff, right? So we're going to hash it, okay? And then when we send that email off, the recipient is going to say, okay, I see this is encrypted with someone's private key, right, which is the sender. So I'm going to go grab the sender's public key, and if I can decrypt it, sounds good. I'll take another hash, and that'll, take another hash to verify nothing was changed in transit. And then we know that it is safe, or at least that it's from the sender, right? So it prevents tampering of content in transit, provides traceable non-repudiation, and forms one leg of the DMARC's trust chain. And then DMARC. So DMARC stands for Domain-Based Message Authentication, Reporting, and Conformance. We love our acronyms in tech. DMARC builds upon SPF and DKIM by adding a policy layer and a reporting mechanism. So DMARC uses both SPF and DKIM to determine if a message is legitimate. So it still does our SPF, it still does our DKIM, right? But it actually creates now a policy based off that. So based off our SPF checks and our DKIM checks, are we gonna do none? Are we gonna quarantine or reject an email? So that's the basis of how DMARC works. So like a DMARC record example would be something in your DNS server that says, hey, we're gonna use this version of DMARC. We're gonna put a policy to it. We're gonna perform our SPF checks and our DKIM checks. And if those things fail, we're gonna reject that sender's email, okay? So I have a little example over here. Let me pause the video and show you guys what a DMARC record would look like. Okay, so this is what a DMARC record was gonna look like. So here we can kind of break this down. I have a breakdown here where the V equals the DMARC version, P equals reject, so that's the policy, right? That's, hey, reject unauthorized emails. So now we have DMARC, we're gonna tell it, what do we determine as unauthorized? And then it can send us a report. So we can have this RUA switch here that says aggregate reports, say, hey, mail these DMARC reports to whatever email we choose, right? It could be a functional email. And then we have this ASPF equals R, relaxed SPF alignment, pretty much saying, hey, we have our SPF checks, and how are we going to enforce them? Are we going to be strict? Are we going to be relaxed? And then we have DKIM. ADKIM equals S means strict DKIM alignment. So if an email passes our checks here, we're going to run this policy, or excuse me, if it fails, right? If it fails these checks, we're going to run this policy. And then this right here is just aggregating our reports, sending those reports to us. Now, these technologies, right, they're so important. I can't spend too much time on them. Again, with these certification exams, it's just we got to, know the material enough to pass an exam to know what they do, right? So SPF is going to verify the sender based off a DNS text record, an SPF record. DKIM is a cryptographic solution that's going to verify the sender's private key by taking its public key and seeing if they can decrypt that digital signature. Then DMARC uses both those checks, the SPF and the DKIM checks, to create a policy that rejects or quarantines or does nothing or passes, right? Now, if you guys want a really good quick lesson just on these, I want to give a shout out to this channel here, Jason Reblos, Teach Me Cyber. He has a great little underrated channel that I watched right before this, just to give myself a little refresher on these technologies. He explains it really well with great visuals, and sometimes learning these technologies outside of a certification exam can really help you in your actual day-to-day, okay? Now let's get back to the slides. Okay, now we're gonna go over some other ways we can determine some malicious payload coming across. Embedded links. So an embedded link is a hyperlink within an email, document, or web page. Now, some may be benign, but they may be malicious. So red flags in embedded links include obfuscation, such as using hexadecimal encoding or shorteners, domain spoofing, or just mismatches between the displayed text and actual URL. You can see here is a great example. Well, this is not an attachment, it's an embedded image that links out to a fake sign-in with Google page that's going to steal your credentials. Okay, then file analysis. So file analysis is the process of examining a file to determine whether it is benign, suspicious, or malicious. This may involve static analysis, dynamic analysis, so looking at files where we actually execute them, or just looking at files, or using like our strings command that we learned in another video. Another way to determine the integrity of a file is hashing, right? You do this when you download something from a website where you want to compare that executable you downloaded to the actual checksum that the website provided you. So you run it through the same hash locally and then compare the two. So hashing is the one way we can verify integrity. So we have common hash algorithms here. And again, this isn't a Sec Plus exam, so I'm not going to dive into how, 256-bit key length is stronger. But I will say is that, yes, I have MD5 up there, but it is deprecated and prone to what's called collisions in hashing. Okay, then we have UBA, User Behavior Analytics. So UBA is a technique for monitoring and profiling user activity to detect anomalies that may indicate insider threats or compromise credentials. Again, this is just looking at those abnormal activities, right? Where we have that user baseline and all of a sudden someone from accounting is trying to access all these files that they don't have access to. All of a sudden we see them working at odd hours, which could say, hey, it's an insider threat, or just that their account is compromised, right? So abnormal activity refers to any behavior that deviates from a user's historical patterns. This is accessing sensitive data, logging in from unknown devices, elevated privilege use, or sudden spikes in activity or data movement, especially during off hours. Another indicator is impossible travel. This is something that's taught, I think, from like the day we probably got this in A+, but essentially this is easy. Is whatever our authentication server is. For example, let's say I'm using Microsoft Entra ID to authenticate users into our domain, to get access to our network resources or the resources in our enterprises. Well, we're going to have some sort of like conditional access or contextual awareness in our Entra ID and our Azure authentication services that says, hey, these users are based in this general location. So if I see a user trying to log in Uganda and Qatar relatively around the same time, that's going to give me some contextual awareness to trigger some conditional access that says, this is impossible travel. So we're not going to maybe deny the login, but we're going to enforce a second or third factor of authentication, right? So that's impossible travel. It's just something that just, you look in the logs, you look at this you have this contextual awareness that says, how is this user doing this, right? How are they logging in at the same time across the world? All right. I'm going to pause the video and let's go ahead and do our quiz. So if you made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking along. Now I'm going to show you guys our learning management system here and go over our quiz. And this is available for purchase. The CompTIA fully self-paced one will be available hopefully by the end of July 2025. Let's do it. So I'm going to go to my lesson here. I'm in domain 1.3.2 and I'm going to scroll down here and we're going to take our domain quiz. Okay, so question 1. Which of the following best describes the role of DKIM in email security? So it's not an SPF record. It's not doing a whitelist. It's a cryptographic measure essentially, right? And again, that's that high level holistic approach, just saying maybe we don't need to break down exactly how it works and the intricacies, but we know it's a cryptographic assurance that email content was not modified in transit. Digital signatures, right? That give us that integrity, that non-repudiation. Question 2. Which of the following best describes the function of Sender Policy Frameworks, SPF, in email security? It doesn't digitally sign. It does check an email sender IP or host name based off a DNS text record. It doesn't encrypt, and it doesn't automatically block phishing emails using a global reputation system. That's more like DNS blacklisting on the email server. So I'm going to go with B here. It checks whether the email sender IP is authorized by the domain's DNS record. An analyst observes the following command in a Windows command line log. So PowerShell, ENC, JAB, and then this base64 string. What is the most appropriate initial response to this observation? All right, awesome. So I'm glad, we do these quizzes because I kind of, this makes me be like, oh man, I didn't dive deep enough into this. But the answer is going to be B. So this is an attempt to decode the base64 encoded content to analyze intent. I did not finish that answer there. It's cut off, so I'll fix that, guys. But yeah, the answer is going to be B. And let's go over this explanation here. So the use of the ENC, it's short for encoded command in PowerShell, is a red flag for potential obfuscation. Attackers often use this technique to hide malicious payloads such as downloaders, file as malware, or privilege escalation scripts. So that's what that PowerShell command does. Okay, question 4. An analyst is investigating a phishing email that displays the text, click here to verify your account. Hovering over the link reveals the URL, loginupdate.paypal.com.evilhost.ru. Whew. So what makes this embedded link suspicious? Well, definitely D, right? That it's PayPal's official website. But no. So obviously it includes a recognizable domain in the subdomain, right? So, we see paypal.com and it looks legit, but we see this RU after it, right? That's really the big red flag here. For as far as like a cyber analyst, right, looking at, could our users fall victim to this? Yes, they probably could, because it's just, they see PayPal, but they don't look at the rest of the URL, especially if it's hyperlinked, right? So they may just have a click here to verify that's highlighted in blue, right? And they just click it instead of maybe hovering over it first and checking, oh, where is this actually taking me? Okay, question 5. Which of the following is the most reliable indicator of periodic command and control beaconing behavior in network traffic? So beaconing, right? It's just a time intervals. So, or, every 60, 80 seconds, whatever. So we're going to go with A here. Outbound connections to a single IP address at consistent time intervals. All right, awesome. We got 100%. Let's go. I want to thank everyone for viewing. Make sure you like, subscribe, share with your friends, and I'll see you in the next video. And yes, we are going to finish this CYSA course. Thank you for viewing.